Good afternoon from Shanghai. Good evening, good morning, and a happy Thursday. Welcome to the Marintec Innovation webinar series, online interaction among distinguished guests. I'm Jinbao Wang, Deputy Director of Shanghai SNAMI, also Chairman of the International Twin Tank Conference, Specialist Committee on Ships' Operational Performance. I'm happy to chair this Smarter Shipping webinar that will hopefully bring you some latest insights and ideas from current maritime world. Ocean shipping is the most important transportation way of international trade. It is estimated that over 2/3 of total world trade volume are dependent on sea transportation. During this process, smarter shipping is highly expected when we keep a watchful eye on the fourth industrial revolution at sea. Today's keynote speaker and distinguished guests will share their latest research findings and viewpoints to this webinar and discuss the way of smarter shipping. Before the presentation, I'd like to give a brief introduction to keynote speaker Dr. Martin Stoffel, because I'm sure you are quite familiar with. Martin is an old friend of Marintec China and the foremost economist and thinker in the maritime world. His books and academic papers have impacted the maritime industry for many years. He's also the non-executive president of Clarkson Research Services. We are greatly honored to have 6 other eminent panelists to join this panel discussion. They will have self-introduction later. The format of this webinar will be keynotes presentation by Martin will take about 20 minutes, then followed by 40 minutes panel discussion, comments, interactions from speakers and the panelists. The final 15 minutes will take questions from audience. If you have questions, please submit to the Q&A box on your screen. Now, let's warmly welcome Dr. Martin for the presentation.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The title of my talk this afternoon is Smarter Shipping, an Overview. And what I'd like to do is to cover in this talk 5 separate points. First of all, how we develop a more carbon-friendly sea trade model, because although the focus is very much on ships, the job that we do is the transport of cargo, and therefore we need to look at the future scenarios for trade to make sure that they're compatible with all the objectives that we have in this new era ahead of us. Secondly, we need to build a fleet of zero carbon ships as soon as possible. That was the implication of the IMO resolution in April 2018, and I would say it's very much more on the agenda today than it was even before the pandemic started nearly a year ago. Thirdly, we need to make ship systems smarter and better at managing emissions. That's a whole area of using digital technology to revolutionise the way that we build the ships that carry the cargo. And in addition to the ships, we need to look at ways of running cargo fleets as transport factories with door-to-door logistics. We have a whole new era of digital communications through satellite system, which are going to make it possible to integrate trade in a way which we've struggled to do for 50 years but have never really succeeded in. And finally, we need to develop upgradable systems which are secure from cybercrime. And these are the 5 things that I want to cover with you. If we start with part 1, develop a more carbon-friendly sea trade model, this particular objective starts from 50 years of globalization, during which the fuel that we burnt in the ships, heavy fuel oil, was extremely cheap. For a long time it was only $1 or $2 a barrel for crude oil, and we're now in an era where, first of all, the fuel is more expensive, and secondly, and most importantly, the emissions, the carbon emissions through that fuel does have a very adverse effect on the environment. So we need to look at the way we manage trade, not just ships, but how we actually decide what we're going to transport by sea. And I've developed 3 scenarios to help to think about this, because we don't know exactly what the right answer is, but these scenarios take account of 2 things. First of all, in the early years, we have the impact of the coronavirus scenarios, and I've got 3 different levels of development here. The first is a fairly mild impact. The second is an impact which lasts until about 2022, and then we get a good recovery in 2023. And then the third one, where various problems arise, the virus doesn't disappear, and we end up with a series of years where the repercussions from the pandemic mean that trade declines over a number of years. It's not the first time this has happened, because in fact in the 1980s we saw that there was a substantial decline in trade. In that case it was due to the big increase in the oil price. So the second set of issues which I've included in these 3 scenarios are the carbon emission, the climate change elements. And the key point to remember here is that, first of all, over a third of today's seaborne trade involves the transport of fossil fuels, and therefore it would be foolish to expect trade growth trends of the last 30 years to continue for the next 30 years, because inevitably there is going to be a reduction in the amount of fossil fuels moved by sea. The second factor is that we can use the new digital technology to find new ways to carry trade, new trading patterns. We can evaluate the carbon emissions much more precisely and make better decisions in the management of trade. And so I've got the 3 scenarios here. The first is mild, and trade grows at about 2% per annum to 21.6 billion tonnes by 2050. In the second scenario, we get a slower growth rate of only 0.9% per annum, reaching 15.5 billion tonnes in 2050. And the third scenario involves quite a serious recession, in fact a very serious recession in the period up to 2025, and then trade grows at 0.9% to 11.6 billion tonnes by 2050. So there's no growth in that scenario. And I leave these on the tables. We need to think about them as time goes by. Part 2 of my comments is involved with building a fleet of zero carbon ships as soon as possible. Over the next 30 years, ship technology is going to be transformed by the phasing out of the primary energy source of heavy fuel oil as the primary energy source. And the way I like to look at this is in terms of waves of change. We're not going to be able to do everything at once, because we can't start to build zero carbon ships today because we haven't got the means to do that. But we can focus on the areas where change is possible today. And I have shown on this chart the 4 scenarios. The first one is the first wave is the wave involving the ships which are in existence today. About 60,000 cargo ships on the water today. These ships will continue to trade through till 2043 or thereabouts. I mean, who can tell? That's a great difficulty. But they have to continue to trade. We will need them to carry the world's cargoes. So the focus here is to do as much as we can with these existing technologies, and I was absolutely delighted to see the IMO resolution for the carbon intensity index and the grading system, which it seems to me is a very direct way of addressing the issue of what you do with the existing ships. So that's a big step forward. The second, of course, the diesel ships which are built in 2020 and later. We don't have replacement technology, so for at least the next 5, 6, 7 years we are likely to be building diesel ships, and these will be greatly enhanced, and it's a generation of ships with improved technology. Then perhaps simultaneously with that, we start to build gas and hybrid ships using LNG as the fuel source and batteries for two purposes. First of all, to allow the ships to operate without emissions in sensitive areas, and secondly, to ensure that the motors on the ships operate as efficiently as possible by running them at the optimum revolutions and generating electricity when you don't need all that power to propel the ship. And there are other opportunities to use this technology as well, which I'll come back to in a minute. The third wave here is zero carbon ships, and I'm assuming that these start to be built in about 3 or 4 years' time. You're beginning to get one or two. In fact, we have on the panel today someone who is dealing with carbon ships and zero carbon ships. So we'll see these emerging and starting to develop as we move towards 2050. And by 2050, all being well, about half the fleet will be these green ships. There is, incidentally, in calculating these scenarios, a fairly extreme assumption about the speed that the ships operate at. I assume that on scenario 2, we're trading the ships at about 11 knots. And the only other thing I want to say under this scenario is that one of the main reasons for doing the gas and hybrid ships is that it gets us started in building the framework of the new zero carbon ships, which are very likely to be electric, and that will put much more focus on the electrical system for the ship, not just in terms of the prime mover, the main engine, but also in terms of using the electrical system to optimise the performance of the ship and to bring in other sources of energy generation which might be quite small, but on an all-electric ship you can integrate them into the system and they can probably make a significant difference. The solar, wind, wave can be quite powerful in this area, and of course we have the need to integrate the fuel cell and everything else into the ship. So that's just a thought on the side, that we need to start developing the platform for the ship as quickly as we can. Okay, well, moving on to part 3, we need to make ships smarter and better at managing emissions, and to do that, a good starting point is to remember that the maritime industry has been used to using digital technology and digital networks for over 150 years, but what we're facing today is what one might describe as a tsunami of digital change. Things are changing very, very rapidly, and I want to talk to you a little bit about the extent of that, and then also to remind you that this digital technology is absolutely brilliant, but it doesn't provide ready-made solutions. Digital technology provides the tools which will allow both the digital engineers and the managers to produce better results. But the results will only be as good as the effectiveness with which those digital tools are put to work. So let's move on and take a quick look at the framework of the digital systems that are in front of us today. And the oldest one is the network of cables, which started in 1860. Interestingly, Clarkson's got started in 1852 and really grew on the back of this network. And in 1872, Clarkson spent more money on cables than wages. So, that gives you an idea of the sort of budget you might think about putting into the new technology. Well, we've now supplemented the cable system with the satellite system, which is a terrific revolution for the shipping industry, because it means you can communicate between ship and shore in real time, and I'll come back and talk about that a little bit more. But the other very big development was in the computer area, because from the 1960s onwards we started to develop the supercomputers which could be plugged into these networks, and that meant you could link up supercomputers, and that started in the early 70s, and today it has grown into the cloud, which is an enormous network of computer storage and systems which allows us to manage and store data on a scale which was unimaginable, both in terms of the very low cost and the very high efficiency of these systems, which of course are accessible through satellite as well as through the ground cables. The other side is the microchips, which developed. These computers got smaller and smaller, and the microchips got so small that today you can buy a microcontroller for less than $1, and that will be a complete computer, input, output, storage, processing power, and yet for $1 you get something more powerful than a supercomputer in 1964 costing $2.4 million. It gives you a scale of what we're doing, and we can pop these microcontrollers into lots of small devices which can then talk to each other, as long as they speak the same language. And that is a very key point. The language of these microcontrollers in communicating is what gives them their power in the Internet of Things. And industry on land and in logistics has used this power of microprocessors and communications to develop the I-4 revolution, and we're now facing this in shipping. We're able to do it thanks to the satellites and all the other developments, and we have both the means to build sophisticated ships which are highly automated on board and are smart, to use that phrase, but also we have messaging systems which will allow these ships and shore to communicate in a way which just wasn't possible even 10 years ago. So we really are facing a tsunami, and that tsunami is going to give us the building blocks for I-4 on board ships and in fleets of ships. Just to give you a very quick idea of what's going on here, this is the Jocelyn, which is a Korean ship launched last year. It has a whole bunch of digital equipment on it. I'm not going to go through it in detail because you can have a look at it yourself, but it incorporates, for example, cargo loading is a very, very crucial part of the operation, and if you can load the computer and also generate the information which gives you perfect cargo manifests on the ship and that sort of thing, this is an enormous step forward. And of course the shipbuilders are coming up with their own onboard systems too. So the ships are launched, the revolution is on its way. The challenge now is to pick up speed and make it work in a commercial setting. And the fourth thing I want to talk about is moving from the ships individually as floating as floating units to ships operated as transport factories. And the way you do this, well, the satellite network is a very big part of this, because this gives us real-time control to communicate between ships and shore and between ships and other ships. And Inmarsat has today 5 of these geostationary satellites, the GX satellites in the air. They are enormously powerful, but they've got another 8 satellites which will be in orbit by the end of 2023, and the most powerful of those satellites will actually be big enough will be equivalent to the 5 satellites that are in the air at the moment. Each one will be as powerful as the 5 satellites in the air at the moment. And if we're going to make all of this work, very briefly, we need to deal with documentation. You think about a container ship. There's probably 30 or 40 bits of information needed. A lot of it's still paper and digital to get that container from the exporter to the importer. And you think of all the computer systems involved in dealing with that over the world's many thousands of ports. Okay, the containers only go through the big ones, but there are many thousands of ports, and there are many thousands of businesses involved in each stage of this process. So there are tens of thousands of computers involved in this. You need to get them talking to each other, and messaging systems is how we're going to do that. Systems and that technology, which is the subject of another topic, I touched on it in my last Marintec talk, is absolutely core issue there. And then finally, as we come to the end, part 5, developing upgradable ship systems which are secure from cybercrime. I'm not going to dwell on this because, again, this is another lecture, but the 5 core requirements of the systems is they must be user-friendly, they must detect and prevent cargo fraud, they must deal with documentation and data security, for example, using blockchain. The ship systems must be secure from cybercrime, and the systems design must support interoperability and upgrading. I'm going to leave it there and move on to my conclusions. First of all, if we're going to manage so much change all at once, we need a strategy. We need cooperation between companies and nations to some extent, and we need great investment. And these are the topics I want to discuss in the panel this afternoon. Building zero carbon ships depends on cooperation between stakeholders, that's the owners, the shippers, the builders and the equipment developers, and it also depends on digital technology being made smarter on board ship to cut out human error. And to do that, we need protocols, we need standards, we need to be talking the same language. It is so important. We've got a chance to do this now. We haven't done it yet. A new business model with all these things is the stepping stone to future market share for individual companies, and those companies will be joining, they're members of the world's oldest industry, they will be joining and following the lead of Silicon Valley, the world's newest business. And the only thing I would say, ladies and gentlemen, is don't expect Silicon Valley profits. It's worth doing because it's worth doing. And on that note, I'd like to thank you all for your attention. Thank you very much.
Dr. Martin for the inspiring and instructive presentation toward smart shipping. Now let's move to panel discussion. First, I'd like to welcome Dr. Martin. Dr. Martin? Yes? Okay. Well, say hello to us.
Microphone.
Turn on your microphone. Yeah, right. Okay, that's right.
Okay, well,
Okay. Say hello to our audience.
Good afternoon, good morning. Wherever you are in the world, it's a pleasure to join you, and I'm really looking forward to this session.
Welcome to join us. Then let's welcome Mr. Li Yanqing from China Association of the National Shipping Industry. Okay. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Also, yes, say hello to our.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, or maybe someone, good evening.
Thank you to join us. Then we welcome Dr. Jane Hoffman.
A wonderful good morning from Geneva in Switzerland.
Okay. It's an honor to have you with us. Also, Mr. Chris Chen from Wasilla.
大家好，午安。Everyone, good morning and good afternoon to you.
Thanks to join us. And also Mr. Toji from Kongsberg. Yeah. Yes? Okay. Then Mr. Li Xin from CCS, sorry.
Hi everyone, it's good to see you, and good morning and good evening for the world. Thank you.
Welcome. Then we'll welcome Mr. Arf and Nandis from ABB.
Yeah, good afternoon from Shanghai and good morning in Europe.
Okay, welcome Dr. Martin and all our distinguished guests. Now I'd like Dr. Martin to moderate the discussion and suggest that each panelist to make self-introduction before your comments on Dr. Martin's presentation. Now, Dr. Martin, your turn.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wang, and I think that it's really great to have this opportunity. It's the last session of the day. Pretty well everyone here, I think, except Terrier, has been involved in the 4 webinars which led up to this conference over the summer. It started about the same time as the pandemic, actually. And since then, we've had 4 Marintec innovation webinars. And I'd like to take this chance to thank Dr. Wang for supporting this initiative. What I think is absolutely the right time to be addressing the issues. Well, I don't need to tell you again what I think they are because you just sat through it. But I think we now have the chance to wind the whole thing up if we can. And I think the way we'd like to play this is that I'd ask each of you to give us a 3-minute quick introduction to yourself and your business and the issues, whatever you want to mention, and that'll take us about 20 minutes. And then we'll have some discussion. I've got some questions here that Dr. Wang prepared, and also I've been through a lot of the questions from the previous seminars which we didn't get a chance to answer. And so I've got a little list here of questions that I'd like to raise. But generally, I hope we can have some discussion after the 20 minutes. So could we start with, I think, Mr. Li Yanqing, would you like to start, please?
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Yanqing Li from China Association of the National Shipbuilding Industry. I'm also the chair of ISO TCH, Ships and Marine Technology Committee. So I'm very happy to join. So I just make a very brief comments on the presentation made by Martin. I think that's it's very interesting that Martin gave the presentation to describe the future using the new technology for shipping industry. So I agree with your point of view on we first need to analysis or the forecast in different scenario. It's much more important. Actually, in IMO, we certain talk about the business model or the market. We just push forward the very stringent regulations or conventions. So the politicians there don't care about the market trade. They don't care about the business model, but actually all are talking about on the application of the new technology whenever for the environmental protection issue or for the trade system, transportation system upgrading, all will driven by the shipowners, I think, all stakeholders. So I think that is very important. That's a very good idea, very good proposals from your presentation. The second is about your chart by the propulsion type in the scenario 2. I think that's maybe will cause in the future, cause our further discussion about that, because we need have the very detailed data to calculate or make the forecast on the application. Because I'm sure the speed of the application of the top technologies on the smart issues will be much more faster than we expected. So maybe that chart will be a big issue for our discussion. Thank you. That's all.
Oh, well, that's great. We got off to a good start with a bit of controversy there. That's what I like to hear, you know. Chris, would you like to follow up now, please?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Thank you very much again for the opportunity. And, as always, Dr. Stofford, fantastic presentation. So really well done. Maybe let me just share a little bit about myself. So I look after digital innovation and strategic projects here at Vatsala. And the company is largely split into 3 groups so that we can combine the expertise and really focus on that and, of course, work together. First part, of course, is the whole decarbonization front when it comes to power and propulsion. And the second part is around systems, especially when you look at LNG systems, scrubber systems. And the third part, which I'm contributing quite a lot into, is the whole voyage or the digital journey of the vessels. So we work together very, very, very closely. But to us, decarbonization and digitization, of course, are 2 very, very big topics for our organization. Now, maybe a couple of points from your presentation that I picked up, which is first and foremost, I think it's fantastic that we're going to zero carbon ships, and there's a number of different initiatives going on, very encouraging. But of course, 25% of the fleet is between 10 to 20 years old, and 41% is beyond 20 years old. So we also really need to focus around retrofitting technology into our existing fleet and make it more efficient as well. And from my perspective, there's not just on the vessel level, which you can optimize the engine and propulsion, but you also mentioned on the systems level on the ship. But we also see opportunity to look at on the fleet-wide and port-to-port ecosystem type efficiency. And I think you mentioned standards and the ability to talk the same language or at least be compatible with it or understand it or interpret it. I think those are absolute key for us to do. But moving forward as well, in addition to looking at what we have today, is as we look at new buildings, we need to take the opportunity to really think about how we do it. How do we design for data right from the start? Because it will be very costly to retrofit. How do we embed sensors? How do we make it compatible with each other? And how do we fine-tune the design? Because I think one of the things that strike me as important is we can't talk about digitization and decarbonization in separation. What I mean by that is that we know that for a lot of alternative fuel, we will have challenge around energy density and the storage requirements and potentially the weight requirements. How can digital help with that as well and design the new vessels differently? I think that will be a very interesting, and of course, regulation will also need to come in. Lots to talk about, but let me not hog the airwaves. I'll pass it back to you. Thank you.
Oh, great. Well, Chris, thanks. As I'd expect pretty key issues that we can come back to. But let's press on with Mr. Li Xin. Have you like to talk to us now?
Hi guys, and I'm Li Xin, and I'm with Starry. The whole name is Shanghai Merchant Ship Design Research Institute, CSSC, and I'm focusing on ship type development and smart ship. And just a couple of minutes ago, Martin gave us a very interesting and very deep insight speech and presentation. And as we know, the coronavirus is, deeply impacts the globalization and the sea trade. And so, as I know, I think the growth of global sea trade and region sea trade will be different. So especially in this in such period, and many countries realize the supply chain is local supply chain is very important, or region supply chain is very important. So the region sea trade could be maybe a big or a quite fast develop, and nowadays we saw many new building or quotation business for the ship. Many of those projects are focusing on the region trade. So I think it could be a signal or a phenomenon for the next sea trade or the shipping. And regarding the smart shipping, and I think the smart shipping is a new way of shipping and fleet management in the future. It's quite different. It needs the ship and the business and the management could be digitalized, could be digital, and it should be connected, ship and shore, and different stakeholders, and of course the ways of the data driven to the business, especially to find the value point inside the shipping. As we know, nowadays the shipping is still conservative, so the owner don't want to pay a lot to a solution that cannot bring any value. So I think the shipping and smart shipping is very difficult, and of course it's necessary because it seems the future way to the industry. So I think for the smart shipping nowadays we are just not only we are focused on not only the system itself but also the value, what kind of value can be created. Yeah, that's all. Thank you, Dr. Martin.
Well, thank you, Mr. Li. I guess you're close to shipbuilding, and one thing shipbuilders know is that if it's extra, it's got to be free, right? And I, in fact, perhaps Terry has said you're the right person from Kongsberg to follow on from that, because you're doing the same, selling to the same market, I guess.
All right.
Okay, you've got it. Yeah.
My name is Terje Eierstad. I'm working from Kongsberg Digital, part of the larger Kongsberg Group. I'm representing the business development and work a lot within the autonomous shipping. So I think within the autonomous shipping, we have these three pillars when it comes to technology. You have the ship itself is with all the technology and all the sensors and all the infrastructure on the ship. And then you have the connectivity and the cybersecurity, which is equally important. And then you also have the remote control center at the end, which is where you really control and do all the goods. So I think all these three pillars needs to be in place in order to have smart shipping and autonomous shipping. And also into the future, I think it's really important to tie this ecosystem that we have also with the port itself. So we kind of have the full logistic chain, not only the ship, but the full logistic chain. And that is really where we will take this smart shipping and bring the value out of it. Because what we see, and I think you really nailed it down, Dr. Martin, when it comes to digitalization, it's really just a tool itself. So I think when you come to using the tools, you really have to see the disruption in the kind of markets. You really see that it will be new roles popping up, it will be new companies popping up, and it will be companies like Master. You see that Wilhelmsen and Kongsberg has kind of made a joint venture. So it will focus more and more on how to transport goods from A to B in the most efficient way. So it's really about disruption, it's about business models, and it's not only about the technology, which I'm representing now. So again, a very, very interesting topic, and I also think we need to look into the rules and regulation for autonomous ships and smart shipping. A lot to be done there before we really have everything in place, so we can have this in large scale. So I look forward to good cooperation within the industry, good cooperation with the regulatory bodies, and we need to have standards. I agree to everything. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. I guess, well, you've used the magic word autonomous ships, which we need to navigate around rather carefully, I suspect. Anyway, on to Alf Kara-Davies. You've been talking to us already today about electrical systems and so forth. You're the king of what goes on the infrastructure of the ship. Would you like to say a word or two?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Dr. Martin, for a very good and insightful presentation. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, so I'm working in LBD, and the area I'm within is called Marine and Ports. So we are not only serving the marine fleet of vessels, but also the port side and the handling of container and bulk in the ports, container harbors and bulk harbors. So basically, I would say that what we are doing in both these areas, we are electrifying the cranes, we are electrifying the propulsion systems for vessels, and we see that more and more automation and even autonomous installations are being installed. Not so much on the ship there, but on the port side now, the state-of-the-art technology there is to have autonomous handling of containers, for example, already. When I saw your presentation, I made a couple of notes also, and also noticing that 2050 is not so far away. It's actually pretty close, and you said that we have to start now. And it was also mentioned here by one of the presenters earlier that the shipping market is considered and maybe really are also a bit conservative in the decisions. I believe that one of the reasons for being conservative is that we as suppliers and service providers might not be good enough to explain the value of the solutions. Sometimes we are making a kind of a big picture of how things should look like in the future without sketching up the steps on the way. So I think that the way to move the industry forward is to, yes, we have a long-term vision of what we want to have, but we need to step it or slice it into smaller steps, where each of the steps makes sense by themselves. And by the end of the day, or by the end of the decade or two, these small steps together reach the solutions that we need to have there. What was also very clear in your presentation, Dr. Martin, was this rapid development of the propulsion, the machinery systems, the infrastructure on board the vessel, the communication, and so on. And I totally agree with you that when doing new building now, this upgradability and future-proofing of the design, of the ship design itself, of course, but also the design of the important infrastructure on board, like the propulsion machinery systems and digital IT systems, so that it is possible to take into use these new technologies and new solutions and new applications, software systems, communication, in a cost-efficient manner in the future. Because this is not the one-step change; it will be a continuous change towards the 2050 target. And if we are not preparing for doing these upgrades and modification on the run, then that will completely slow down the development that we have agreed to have.
Well, thanks. That's jotted down quite a few good points to pick up later in that lot. And I do agree with you about the upgradability thing. That, I mean, most of us are engineers, or most of the people around here, I'm not an engineer, but a lot of you are engineers and naval architects. But the sort of upgradable ability I think we're thinking about going forward is going to be digital. And if you run, I ran the IT at Clarkson's for a few years, and the big thing you worry about is rolling out upgrades and checking, disaster control and that sort of thing. And what worries me more than anything about the way we're going is how you manage to ensure that you can upgrade systems without making a mess of other systems on the ship. I mean, it's a difficult challenge, I suspect. I'll be coming back to that one. I've got one or two targets, but the last person on the list, and very fittingly, I think, is Dr. Jan Hoffman from UNCTAD. Would you like to sort of round off this little introductory session, Jan?
Yeah, thank you very much. Very enjoyed the very insightful presentation and the discussion. Asked to introduce ourselves. We're working for UNCTAD, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. It's your taxes who pay my salary. Thank you very much. So we better try and help you. And what do we do to help the world? We like to say we have three pillars. We think, we debate, and we deliver. So we think, we produce research products like our radio maritime transport and country profiles and statistics. Then we debate, we help our member states here in Geneva, the delegates, but not just in Geneva, also we work with the IMO to negotiate decarbonization, the WTO to negotiate trade state reform. And last but not least, we provide technical assistance, support to customs, supports to sustainable freight transport systems, and so on. So that's what we do. And with this background, I benefit a lot from this discussion, and I think we may three thoughts I noted down while listening to the presentation. We had the benefit of having seen the presentation already a little bit earlier. So three thoughts. First one, what Martin described as the waves of the new shipping and the replacement and so on. Just very recently, Clarkson's, Martin's colleagues, highlighted that we have a record downturn in the order book. Ship owners are right now confronted with uncertainty about what will be the new technologies required, what will be the new regulations, and when do they have to use which fuel and so on. And all of a sudden, everything is put on hold. And as we, UNCTAD, work with the IMO and member states to analyze what will be the impact of those regulations, maybe one of the biggest impacts is the impact on the global supply-demand balance, that things are being put on hold, and we've seen freight rates already going up. That's number one. Number two, I just want to very briefly highlight, reiterate, underline the importance of standards. You described the three networks and the fourth network on the ship. They're all mostly hardware, but then you also highlighted the digital aspect of this. I think we can learn a lot from the container. Container was invented by a private person, private sector. It started changing the world when it became the global standard, an ISO public good standard. And the third and last thought to complement, which I think we haven't really discussed yet, but what does all this transformation you're looking at mean for the demand side? 40% of volume of seaborne trade is energy, oil, coal, gas, products. So what if, maybe a bit of science fiction, but if all this is no longer there, that's really bad news for the ship owners. 40% less cargo if we really go to renewables. No? And if really, right now, the new technologies, the new fuels make shipping more expensive. Right now, the discussion is how can we make the new ships competitive vis-a-vis the old ships by, for example, making the old ships more expensive through a levy on fuel, for example. But in 30, 40 years from now, the marginal cost of moving goods will be much less. So you will have less cargo, no energy to transport, and you can go faster, cheaper, so you need fewer ships for the same volume. But that's a bit of longer-term science fiction, extrapolating the trends that Martin described so nicely in the presentation. Thanks.
Oh, well, Jan, thanks very much. I must say, if having listened to that, if the guys here, if you guys can't come up with an answer, then we're not going to go anywhere, because you couldn't have a better sort of breadth of expertise than we've got in this group, and it is the last session, so I'm going to push us a little bit hard to try to get some more specific ideas out of this. I don't know, Dr. Wang, do you want to say anything before we get started?
Well, I think our eminent guests, I should leave more valuable time to them, because we have limited time. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Wang. Just checking. You must always be thought, but be courteous to your hosts. And well, I think we started with Li Yangqing's comment about the speed of application. I mean, Mr. Li, you picked up my waves of change, which are not very scientific. It's just based on what people, I mean, I worked in shipbuilding for quite a long time, and things tend not to move very quickly. And then I think Jan Hoffman finished off the session by saying that we have a problem with ship owners not being very willing to order ships. And I think Mr. Li Xin, I think really, if I read between the lines of what he said, was telling us that it's very difficult to get to come up with designs that satisfy the financial and investment requirements of the ship owners. So I think what I'd like to do is, if we could start off with this question of pace of change, and let's just sort of go around with perhaps maybe Terrier, you're sitting in Kongsberg. You have, I seem to remember, you've got like your K-Chief system is on 10,000 ships, is that right?
Yeah, I think it's close to 12,000, yes.
Yeah, okay, so you must have tentacles into the fleet, and you must be very familiar with the practicalities of running ships with this sort of digital technology. So would you like to sort of pick up the question of the pace of change and how quickly we can do this, and what the shipbuilders, and we are hosted by the shipbuilders, what the shipbuilders ought to be doing today to move things forward,
Yeah, it's. I think the pace of change is definitely a rapid change. I mean, we can see that the technology is being used quicker and quicker, so to say. And I think really the biggest change is the connectivity and the possibility now to really start harvesting data from those systems, from the control systems. And that's really an enabler also for new smart shipping and smarter shipping is to get all the data and get all the ships connected in some kind of common ecosystem and then kind of link all partners into one common system. That would be a vision, because then we could really start to get smart shipping in place. And today we are focused most on the K-Ship 600 system and get those ships connected up in the ecosystem. But I think in the future, if we can standardize that and get more partners on board and do better collaboration, it will definitely speed up, because you just see the start of it. That's my take on it.
I take that. but I'd like to sort of maybe bring in Alf here, because you talked about the importance of upgradability, and in a way, the reason that Jan's concerned about the investment cycle, the unwillingness of owners. I've heard a lot of owners talk about this, and they don't want to order ships now because they're worried that in 5 years' time the ship will become obsolete. And so, I mean, do you think it is possible, Alf, to start to build in upgradable systems on board ships through the electrical system and through the onboard systems? How can you do that?
Yeah, I believe it is there, and we see also some ship owners are focused on it and aware of it as well, and doing planning for future upgrades and modifications as well. And technologies which might not be financially feasible today is expected to be in 5-10 years' time. Like use of batteries. You have also some other examples in your presentation on solar and wave and fuel cells and alternative fuels. What helps to make this upgradable is to plan this electrical infrastructure so that it is easier to plug in and plug out, plug in new and plug out older technologies, and just upgrade parts of the system rather than a complete system. I also noticed in one of your presentation, one of your slides, you had this DC question mark, AC and DC question mark. And we see DC is coming very much now into these newer ship types and newer, especially smaller vessel types, because DC is easier to integrate with other new technologies, which are not maybe financially feasible today, but expected to be. So, and that requires not only that the infrastructure is there, but also some ship design. There must be some allocation for place in the future for a hydrogen tank or something, or at least easily to modify the design to put in a hydrogen tank someplace, if that is the target on the longer term. So yes, it is possible, and we see all the ship owners and ship designers are going into that direction. Maybe not as fast as we could do, but we see good examples.
I think this is getting to the heart of the matter, but you also mentioned the importance of explaining things to the customers and the owners. And I'm having spent 8 or 10 years on this smart shipping subject, I'm very conscious that it's not so easy for the typical bulk shipping company to get to grips with this stuff, because the average company has 2 people in the office for every ship at sea. So I guess maybe I could follow up by asking Chris to talk a little bit about how, I mean, you've heard what Terje said, what Alf said, what Mr. Leishin has said. How do we sell it to the ship owners? I mean, you have good marketing stuff, and Portzilla is very into this sort of thing. How do we get the simple story across that will convince them, the ship owners, that the ship they buy today is upgradable? And Inmarsat is selling its global fleet network on the basis that it will be totally digitally integratable. In other words, each system. So have you got some thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me okay? Because you were breaking up before. Yeah, okay, excellent. So maybe before I get there, maybe just to build on the gentleman as well. I think what we've seen also is at least from a catalyst perspective on the technology side, the increase in bandwidth and availability of connectivity will have a big impact in terms of what we call smart shipping. The reason why we don't have so many applications, and the applications are not so detailed compared to your mobile phone and the day-to-day, is largely because of connectivity, bandwidth, and cost. And these will become better and better. And the way that we actually treat, the data and to be able to move it off the ship via, edge computing or cloud computing will also shift. Now, how do we get customers to understand that? It's a very good question. And I don't think there are, well, there's definitely not a, one customer, of course, but you've got segments of customers. We do see actually some customers having very holistic, very good understanding of that. And it is as much about using technology as an enabler, but I think also we talked about how technology can unlock value. And what I do see, though, is that a number of companies have got very different or changing mindset, first and foremost, changing mindset and culture, both within the team that operates both the operations and the maritime, but you know what, even on the board level. And I think the shipping industry is not the only industry going through this. We can have a lot of inspiration from banking, for example, where traditional banks are also under a lot of disruption from digital banks and different ways of doing things. And I think, we're seeing a subset of customers certainly really looking into that. But in terms of economic feasibility, I think that's one thing. Of course, we do need to do that. And that comes with the ability to reuse and standardizing, even amongst sort of peers and industry partners. But I think one thing that drives a lot of that also is more often than not, if you talk about beyond the standard regulatory environment, if you talk about autonomous, for example, if you talk about crew reduction, for example, if you talk about, using some of these, well, actually regulation is super, super important because customers will not, certainly they're very happy to do proof of concepts together with the regulators, but they will not and are not able to make those investment decisions unless there's also regulatory certainties as well. So in my opinion, I think we need to do a lot more co-development. And I think it's fantastic to see IMO coming together. I'm also encouraged to see that actually port authorities themselves are also coming together. For example, the Massport initiative, whereby 9 port authorities are coming together to look at safe assurance of autonomous or semi-autonomous systems. I think those things will absolutely help. Oh, you're muted, by the way. Oh, Dr. Soffit, you're muted.
Sorry. I started switching my phone. This is a bit of digital technology that needs fixing. It needs to be able to recognise when you're speaking. Yeah, that's good. I think that's a great answer, and I think you've also teed up the next point for Jan Hoffman to come up with, because in their recent publication, the Maritime Transport Study, they published a lot of new work about the routes and the connectivity of ports. And I guess the big question here, several people have mentioned it, is it's not just the ships. You've got to link those ships into the port network and the through transport network. And I wonder, Jan, whether you could sort of pick up on what Chris has said in terms of how far we've got in the ports with actually harvesting information and sharing it with ship owners and with others.
Yes, in fact, we have seen a push towards more demand for these type of technologies now, thanks to COVID-19. Many, be it customs authorities, port authorities, health officials, but also private sector, they were reluctant to, in the past, they did not so much want to move towards digitalization, which is a part of connectivity that then needs to link to the physical part. When you described your networks, your physical networks, the infrastructure, the digital part needs to be connected. And we now see, all the good things of pre-arrival processing, electronic payments, automation, tracking systems, all these are now in more demand because of the pandemic. And we see this actually also in our own work, because a lot of the programs that UNCTAD has are supporting those initiatives: customs automation, port reforms, trade information portals, electronic payments. So in that sense, one could be optimistic from the response we got on the pandemic. I wanted to say one quick thing, one step back on the costs and change and the uncertainty. I'm not sure, maybe I'm biased, whether this will actually help to move towards market-based measures. Because with the market-based measure, it would still be the ship owner who then decides what technology to use, whether to go slow or not, or to use this or that fuel, as long as he knows the price of fuel will be so and so many dollars higher than in the past, thanks to a levy, contribution, whatever name you give it. I personally, as an economist, as a theoretical economist, I love that solution because it's the polluter pays principle, it's the internalization of externalities. That's the theory, yeah? And I'm looking for arguments to support my theory. And anybody can support a levy on fuel to reduce a little bit the uncertainty that we see at this moment about future regulations.
Yeah. Well,
I'm returning a question to the moderator and the colleague.
No, this is what I've discussed with you for your one of the previous events. And the great difficulty with the fuel levy is that it's so much money's involved. If you put $1,000 a ton on bunker oil, you collect billions of dollars a year. And the argument over who actually gets the money would make Brexit look like a drop in a teacup. It's I'm told it's not possible to do this, but maybe.
The thing is, the new technologies, it costs even more. I mean, there are options, and the beauty of a levy, I'm going to do my sales pitch, at some point in time, it will go down to zero. Because if we really achieve the objectives of the IMO and others in Paris to go to zero, it will go back to zero. So,
yes.
But yes, it is a long discussion.
Luckily, we don't have to solve this problem here. And this is the technologist's day, and I'd like to go back to Mr. Li Yanqing and ask him a quick question to follow up all of this. I hope we've managed to develop your theme quite a bit, but quite a few of the questioners have raised the issue about standards. I mean, Alf mentioned it, and this question of getting digital equipment to talk to each other. And, oops, Daisy, sorry. Why do these things never switch off when you want it?
Urgent matters you need to deal with.
I hope there's no fine for your phone going off in the middle of this session.
It's very brave.
There are no fines. But on the, you have this fantastic position as chairman of the ISO committee. What is the chance of getting some standards, some digital standards for shipping to do things like control area networks and other areas which would, is that something that's possible?
Very interesting. Several years ago, we have established a working group. So we call it Smart Shipping. At that period of time, most people have some confused by this concept. So now we have published several international standards and also registered some. So the total is up to 19 standards, including some proposals. But the problem for me, as the chair and the convener, so is we need more experts to join us. And that the ecosystem for our shipbuilders is not so welcome the new technology, the holders. So that's why I have some statements inside our TC8. That's to say we need forge a new ecosystem. So we're open to the world to welcome the different ideas, the technology, the holders, experts from other sides to come with us. But first, we don't do standards. We just make the study group. So we said panel or study group to discuss the possibility, the standards. So several panel and the study group now is talking about the network, the communication systems and the data format and also some of the network server and software maintenance on board. So it seems we still need a long time, several years, to wait for the more practices from industry.
Well, that's a very good intervention, I think, here, because if there's one thing that could come out of these webinars, it seems to me, it's the need for more courses which do marine engineering and digital technology, naval architecture and digital technology, and actually, it's what happened in the steam era. The great development of naval architecture started in the 1860s when suddenly shipbuilders needed to do calculations over steel and steam engines, which they just didn't have the knowledge to do. And I think, in a sense, shipbuilders today are in that same position, that the functional systems on board have always been in the background. The focus is on building steel very low man hours and very efficiently. And I think one very good conclusion out of this discussion would be that we need to think very hard about educating people for the shipping and shipbuilding industries in digital technology. Would you say that was a fair conclusion?
Dr. Martin, thank you very much. I think all our eminent guests, yes, have contributed quite a lot. This is a very interesting and constructive dialogue. I believe we are making a big stride toward smart shipping. Now I think it's time to attend to our audience. Well, the first question I think is for Jen, because this is for UNCTAD. Well, the question is, what is the biggest challenge to facilitate worldwide transport and trade? And what measures will be taken from UNCTAD? This is the first point. The second point is, how will ports in the developing countries be able to cope with unmanned ships in the light of the level of their technology development? Is it clear, Dr. Chen?
Okay, yeah, it's a very broad, big question, but very close to our heart, which combines the transport part with the trade facilitation part, which we work on. And I had said, I believe in my earlier opening, that technological progress will never be as slow as today. It's of course not slow, it's fast, but it's going to be ever faster. So when we work at commitments to facilitate and streamline and the procedures, make it easier in ports, in general, in border crossings, developing those solutions, technologies, but also the regulation, it takes time. So we really must be forward-looking and ambitious and think that there will be better solutions in the future. And I hope I'm not becoming too technical here, but in the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement, there are 12 articles, 37 measures, and one of them, the Article 10.1, is the one that we must continuously review, revise, analyze, and streamline and further improve. And that is one on which we work. We work with the National Trade Facilitation Committees. We work with trade information portals, which counts steps, looks at procedures to see potential to improve. There are, as I said, 12 articles, 37 specific measures that say you must have advanced ruling, you must have pre-arrival processing, you must have a single window, and so on and so forth. They're all good and important. And at some point in time, every country will tick them off. And that's what we work. We advise them, we help to tick off these obligations. Then you can say, I am compliant. Well, Article 10.1 will still be relevant in 100 years from now and will support shipping and ports, and by continuously streamlining and analyzing, counting steps. I could go on and on about this, but I hope that answers this question.
Okay. Dr. Chen, thanks for your answer, and also thanks for the contribution from UNCTAD. Okay, next question is, I think, might for ABB, because let me see, what is the difference between marine 5G technology and land 5G technology? This is the first point. And the second is, what is the achievement and the difficulty of 5G application in the construction of smart ports and also during the process of operation? Arf?
Yeah, I think there are better specialists on that question other places. So maybe Kongsberg or Wärtsilä, Chris.
Terry, very happy to share the stage with you. I think, I mean, it is one form of communication method. I think 5G is fantastic because of the low latency and very high bandwidth. So if you think about on the port side, if you're having, let's say, for example, the busiest ports in the world, Shanghai, Singapore, you've got hundreds of automatic, ground vehicles, guided vehicles running around, and you've got automated cranes, and you're transmitting it back to the central control room. You need redundancy. Not all of them will be connected by fiber, which is another form of very high-speed sort of connectivity. So 5G is fantastic, but it really comes back down to the use case. I think where 5G really excels is the fact that it's got very low latency, and if you're running fully autonomous, and you need computers to speak to computers, vessels, vehicles to speak to vehicles, that's fantastic. And there are a number of countries that are very forward-looking and rolled out 5G coverage. China is definitely one of them, but the coverage is still a problem. So when it comes to maritime 5G, we see a lot of ports doing a lot of proof of concepts. They're working collaboratively with network providers to look at how they build the next generation port. Makes a lot of sense. But when it comes to actually interfacing with vessels, there are not that many vessels with 5G connectivity, and it'll be hit and miss. But satellite is everywhere. What we do see though is what we call graceful degradation, whereby you pick the best, and sometimes the best also means the most cost-efficient route to transmit information. Terry, would you like to add more to that?
No, I fully support you there. I think it's definitely tested out in some proof of concepts when it comes to short sea shipping and autonomy. It's really interesting technology, but the coverage is still a challenge. But as we know, it will develop over time. So I mean, it's definitely an interesting technology, and it will increase. The coverage will increase year by year. So I guess in a few years from now, we will see something different. It will be maybe the standard. Yeah.
More comments on this? Oh, okay. Next question might be for you, Mr. Li Yanqing and Mr. Li Xin, because this is for China. Well, what is the main obstacle toward smart shipping in China, and what is the possible roadmap from your observation?
There are many obstacles, there are many problems. But now for China or for the world, it's almost the same, that we have the different the roadmap for the technology solutions. So actually for the concept, we have not reached the agreed protocols. So I think that's now, for the time being, we need many practices in different ways. But maybe 2 years or 3 years later, we need come to the same, almost the same agreements on the direction of the autonomy or a smart. No, it's a confused time. So I don't think that we have the effective way, only the practice.
Okay, Mr. Li Xin, what is the comment on this?
Yeah, so I prefer the difficulties. I think is better than obstacles because nowadays in China, many owners have changed their mindset. Have changed their mind. They think the digital smart shipping is the future of the business. So I think the first step is finished. So people are willing to accept this kind of novel or digital technology to applying to the business, to the shipping. Then nowadays, I think there was two difficulties. That is to accelerate or to the smart technology. One is the shipping activities.
This is the technical pause. Okay, I believe from Mr. Li Xing's...
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yes, now.
Sorry, I'm back.
Please.
Just a little break. And the one is to find a value point. And if we cannot find one of those, so the industry may not have intention to smart shipping or how to say transform themselves. We always say digitalization transforms. So I think this is not this is unlikely to how to say to have the owner to accept the smart shipping. Another one is how to realize the value with not much technical difficulties or investment. It's unlikely that owner will pays a lot for smart solution when the game is fewer than cents. So especially in such period, the owners is always struggling in the market. But except those 10 years ago, there was a crazy period in the maritime industry. But that's a story. That's a legend, or that's a story cannot repeat again in our lifetime. So I think for the owner, they are counting every cent every day. It's very conservative industry, and everything should be valued. And regarding the roadmap, I think it's very hard. It's very hard to say, and I'm very lucky that I am the member of ISO TCH, which is chaired by Mr. Li Yanqing, and so actually we've talked a lot about the roadmap in several meetings inside our group. So I think it varies between the different shipping scenarios and the owners and the business mode. For example, the transocean shipping and the local short shipping is quite different. So that's why Yara project can be realized, but Yara project cannot repeat for 20,000 TEU container vessel for Maersk Line or COSCO shipping. So it's quite different. So the roadmap for COSCO shipping or Yara project is quite different. I have to,
yeah. Okay. Thanks very much for the analysis. As to, let me see, Yara Berkeland project. Also, the next question is about this. It is reported that an autonomous container ship, Yara Berkeland, will put into practice and sail autonomously on 2022. What is the latest progress of this ship? I think Toji is for you.
Yes, the latest project, Yara Berkeland, or progress on that is that the ship has been built. It's sailed to Norway, so it's actually now located in Brevik, close to the Yara factory. It will not be fully autonomous the first years. It will start to sail with people on board, and then we will continue the development on the autonomous functionality, and that will go in parallel with all the other projects, including the OSCO project. So the exact date when it will be fully autonomous, I can't really say, but it's a work in progress. But the ship is out sailing on the sea today.
This is a very pioneering project, and we are looking forward to this. Okay, next question is, I think for all guests have seen the term smart shipping new ecology. May I ask whether the industry has a more accurate account of this? If so, can you talk briefly about this concept and the current stage of development? If not, can you tell what is the start point for the ultimate development of smart shipping? I think this is a very interesting question. Who will have some comment on this?
Maybe comment quickly, and then I guess Varshila or Chris can also comment on it. Smart shipping is an autonomous shipping is under development, and there is several kind of prototypes. I mentioned earlier today also in a presentation about AutoShip, a huge research project that is kind of driving this development ahead. And I would say that within like 2 to 3 years, we will probably have the first prototypes out sailing, and there is development on all the 3 pillars as we speak. So if that answers your question, or you can jump in, Chris.
Yeah, no, thank you, and I agree with you. I think for that perspective, I think it's really important that whatever we're doing includes the whole ecosystem partners. What do we mean by that? Having just the end user and the owner, well, okay, they might have certain drivers, but at the end of the day, you've got technology providers, but you've also got class societies, and you've got insurers. And of course, you've got the regulators, in which case, if it's not going, transocean, then if it's local port, you've got port authorities, etc. So we have to work together in order to make it reality. I think that's really important point, and all the technology pillars. But maybe one thing that is slightly more controversial is that actually we, as an industry, need to do better. We need to do better with our talent and our capability and diversity. What do we mean by that? Technology should not be also designed purely for the younger generation. For example, one of the projects that I'm running at the moment, we've got crew members going from 25-year-old to 60-year-old, and we want to design technology that everyone can use and want to use. The other thing is people are really important. Yes, we're talking about autonomous technology, but we're talking about multi-level autonomy and working with the partners, and importantly, the unions are very important. I have the head of the union working on my projects so that they can provide the feedback with the human sort of centricity. So my plea to the industry is that we should also look at diversity. Another great, for me, perhaps a good indication of we succeeded is also we'd love to see more females in the panel in the future. So I think diversity will be fantastic over time. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the answer and analysis. And next question might be also for Arf. Well, as we know, smart sensor or equipment.
No, I lost your voice now.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
I will repeat. This question is smart sensors and equipment system are the base of smart ship, and also smart ship will be the base for smart shipping. From your perspective, what ABB has done and or contributes to this?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, from ABB, we are supplying several types and applications of sensors. It can be sensors for fuel measurement. It can be sensors for, of course, everything related to electric sensors and measurements, and also the actuators, electrical actuators, valve control. So we have several both intelligent sensors, we have intelligent actuators, and of course embedded control systems from almost everything. So more or less everything which is now put into this propulsion system to contain a smaller or bigger microcontroller, as Dr. Martin talked about earlier, to collect information and do some local processing, maybe even some local control, and then connect it to the network. And then of course, when we have this platform or intelligent sensors and actuators, putting them together into an integrated automation system, then this data will be available for the application. So it's I see it more like this one, like a telephone. It's a platform, built-in sensors, and what I would like to see more into the future is to develop this ecosystem, digital ecosystem, where it is easy to plug in application. So rather than sensoring up the whole vessel again, utilizing what is already on board, plug in an app, as we call it in iPhones, and do specialized work for doing diagnostics, for doing control, reporting, and so on. So I think that is the way forward, and not only on board the vessel, but also when it comes to this connectivity and operational centers, either with the fleet management or with the service providers. Also set up that one as this digital platform for easy to connect applications from third parties or from any other party to on the standard platform. Because I think there will be so much need for doing this kind of functionality and apps in the future. There is not one company who can do it all.
Okay. Thanks for the effort and contribution from ABB. Well, Dr. Martin, would you please make some concluding remark on this?
You're muted, by the way.
Yes. No.
It's well, I think that's, if there's one message I would take away from all of this, it actually relates to the fact that I forgot to switch my microphone on, because one of the biggest problems that we found over the last 30 years with introducing automation on ships is designing the interface between the individual and the system. This is what Alf was talking about. And in fact, the biggest oil spill ever in 1967, the Torrey Canyon, was caused by an autopilot with a switch which looked as though it was on, off when it was actually on. And that was the major contributor. And I think that I know people like Wärtsilä have looked into this, and the whole question of designing interfaces so that the chief engineer has no difficulty in using them is something that goes across nearly everything that we're going to do. In terms of this panel, I think it's, which I think is really what you wanted me to sum up, Dr. Wang. I'd like to thank everybody on the panel. I think this has been a really good balance of skills. I mean, it's been so nice to hear so many people who've obviously thought very hard about these issues, and it gives me great confidence that as we move forward, we actually have got a real body of people who are addressing these issues together. And I do think that this is a discussion that needs to carry on. And perhaps, Dr. Wang, one of the issues is how we can draw together some of the conclusions we've reached, because I think there have been some really quite strong conclusions and indicators here about where we should be going. And that involves people, it involves the design of ships, it involves dealing with the customers and those that have difficulty accepting the need for new technology and coming to terms with this and and overcoming the concerns about upgradability. And these are all issues that have come up. So I'd like to take this chance to thank everybody for joining in. Fantastic discussion, and I look forward to talking to you all again. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you for your remark. It has been a fascinating dialogue. Thank you all for joining the panel, and may I invite you to thank Dr. Martin Stoffel, Mr. Li Yanxing, Dr. Jane Hoffman, Mr. Chris Chen, Mr. Cai Yu Liang, Mr. Toji, Mr. Li Xin, Mr. Arf, for your excellent and generous sharing. I do hope today's webinar is most insightful to you all. Today's session has been recorded and will be available on the Marintec China 2021 website next week. Thank you all for joining us today. Wish you all safe and healthy. Looking forward to seeing you again next year. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.